Hey guys, it's Mario here, and I want to welcome you to a Q&A on the topic of intermittent fasting. And I know a lot of you guys have been sending in questions, sending in emails, and I finally got to check the mailbag and dig out all the frequently asked questions, go through all the comments and the videos related to intermittent fasting to answer and bundle them all together in this one little video here that I'm going to be reading out, answering questions for you guys. And I know a lot of you have been following the IF lifestyle, and I mean, shout out to all my bros who've been doing this for a while. I've been doing this since 2010, and it felt like I was released from the prison of 6-7 meals a day back in 2010 when I first started out this. It felt like such a relief that I can live my life. I can skip breakfast because I was never hungry in the morning, and I was just force feeding myself with oats as soon as I woke up, and I was on the verge of puking every time I would enter the car to drive to work back then, and it was really terrible. And then I moved to IF. Felt such a relief, and it's such a crazy thing. Just that small just relief that when I adopted that lean gains lifestyle. I mean, back in the day, Martin Berkham was the one who was first popularizing this 16-8 approach. And it was such a crazy shift in my lifestyle. I felt like I started enjoying the healthy lifestyle much more, and it wasn't such a drag on my social life. I was counting meals. I was counting everything. I was carrying around Tupperware, waiting for the next meal to hit it exactly at 2.5 hours after the previous one. It was terrible, right? So let's get back to the Q&A. As I said, shout out to all my boys doing IF. And the first question I'm going to cover here, something that is often asked when we're talking about IF, and that is a caloric deficit still necessary while you're doing intermittent fasting if the goal is weight loss? So this question comes in a lot of forms, and I know where this is coming from. There's multiple reasons why this question is asked. And of course, I mean, questioning the energy balance equation in 2017 and right now it's like saying the world is flat. You know, Galileo is going to wake up and he's going to slap you in the face it's just crazy, right? And there's still a lot of stuff going on and multiple reasons why people question it. Number one reason is marketing, right? There's a lot of BS out there. I mean, if you look at Amazon book listing on books related to intermittent fasting, a lot of them will kind of have a subtitle, or they're going to have like headlines or bullet points saying, oh, you don't need to track your calories. You know, you're going to lose weight without ever worrying about how much you eat. And it's just a bunch of nonsense. Like, we know that energy balance equation applies, and there's plenty of people, including myself, I could get all my calories in one single meal, and I bet you can do that as well. Whether it's 3,000 calories, 4,000 calories, it's going to be a little bit hard, but even if I'm eating 1 or 2 meals a day, I can still get that amount of calories in that 24-hour period, and I will definitely not be losing weight on 3,000 to 4,000 calories, and I can definitely get fat if I continue doing that. And I mean, a lot of the marketing, that's one point. The second point is that a lot of people that start doing IF, similarly when I started doing IF and I was tracking my calories and macros prior to doing intermittent fasting, I would often find that, let's say, reducing that meal frequency from 4 to 6 meals, I was doing 6 to 7 back then, to let's say 2 to 3 meals, what happens essentially is that you eat less. You almost forget to eat food. And this is a very common occurrence, and I've noticed this when I was tracking all my calories and my macros. I would be looking in, like, at the end of the day, back then I was using spreadsheets, and I would find like, well, shit, I mean, I still have 500-600 calories to hit, and I'm not really hungry. And that's kind of why people, let's say when they first move to IF who are not tracking, I mean, majority of people are not tracking calories and macros. It's just us neurotic guys looking to get shredded and lean and things like that, and they will naturally lose weight because they're going to enter that caloric deficit. And once they do that, and they're of course going to be losing weight for a period of time, but the weight loss will generally stop happening, right? Because your body will adjust eventually to that caloric intake. You will lose a bunch of weight, your metabolism will slow down a little bit, your non-exercise activity, and all these general adaptations that happen, and it's not going to work anymore. And once it stops working, of course, I mean, at that point, you can start caring more about calories and macros and figure out how much you need to eat to enter that deficit. But it doesn't mean that you weren't in a deficit before, right? I mean, the deficit was happening, but you just weren't aware of it. And is it necessary to be in a deficit to maximize fat loss? Absolutely. Maximizing fat loss, it requires a caloric deficit. Can you lose fat on, let's say, a maintenance calorie intake while at the same time gaining a ton of muscle depending on your setup, on your genetics, on your training experience? Yes, that is possible as well, but we're talking about maximizing fat loss. That's the key word here. I'm not saying that you can't lose fat without being in a deficit. You can while doing maintenance calories, but it's not gonna be the maximum amount, and it's gonna generally take a lot longer to get to the same body fat percentage than if you just committed to an approach which is fat loss, or whether in the same way you committed to a quote-unquote lean bulk or whatever else to gain muscle, right? So to maximize, you actually have to commit, and this is something a lot of people aren't willing to do. That's a whole different video, so we're gonna get that into a different Q&A. So yeah, deficit definitely necessary. Start tracking your calories. That's just if you're not sure how much you're eating. A second question, and a very common one actually as well. I can train at X hour in the evening after work/classes. When should I have my first meal? So it's a question of when are you going to open up that eating window, whether it's let's say 4, 6, or 8 hours or 10 hours. I would generally assume that the questions that are coming are related more to that 16, 8-hour approach, so 8 hours eating window. And you definitely, I mean, looking at the Lean Gains approach, this approach was meant for people who are living that kind of lifestyle, for people who are, let's say, doing a 9 to 5, or people who are having classes in the morning and then ends the classes like somewhere earlier, mid-afternoon, and then you hit the gym in the evening. And that's when the peak hours in the gym, if you ever looked at the gym, usually, let's say, starting 6 p.m., but about 9 p.m., that's where most people are in the gym. And looking at the approach, I mean, there's nothing wrong with having, let's say, your first meal during a lunch break, or let's say around 12, around, let's say, between 11 and 1, and the last meal between 7 and 9. And that tends to work for a lot of people. A lot of people are super happy with this approach, because generally, if we're going out to eat food with people, those dinners tend to happen around 8 p.m. as well. So it fits the lifestyle. It's a very, very sustainable approach in the long run. So definitely, I mean, first meal around 12-ish. If you want to push it more, if you want to reduce it a little bit, not a big deal. And I would say the Lean Gains approach for this scenario is probably the best approach out there. And if you want to do a warrior diet or something, I mean, you can still just keep pushing that eating window and open up the eating window a little bit later, and then you open up those up 4 hours, and then you can have just a pre-workout meal and a post-workout meal if you're training in the evening. So now, a second question related to this, I mean, the third question overall is, I can only train at an X hour in the morning before work/classes. Is it okay to continue fasting? Should I take BCA before workout, or just get food after training? So this is a question of, let's say you're super busy in the evening. You know that you're not going to be able to stick to your workout plan. You can't make it consistent, and you can only train in the morning. Let's say wake up at 5:30 a.m. and you were in the gym at 6 and you finish your workout at 7. And what do you do at that point? How do you manage your nutrition? And this is a point where you either, number one, have to be able to live with trade-offs, or just forget the whole idea of intermittent fasting, right? So when we're talking about trade-offs, let's assume that you want to do IF at any cost, right? So you want to do IF. So here are the trade-offs. Number one scenario, you're looking to maximize muscle growth, right? So you're looking to absolutely maximize muscle growth. You have BCA before the workout. So you have the BCA and potentially a piece of fruit to have some carbohydrate before workout. You want to maximize your results. Remember, that's the key. And carbohydrate before workout has been shown to be helpful in certain scenarios to optimize your performance. Then you have that workout. You have the first meal, let's say about 7:30-ish, your first meal, and your last meal, you're going to close up that window 8 hours later. So we're talking about 3 to 4 p.m., right? This can work. This will maximize your muscle growth. You're going to have, let's say, 3 to 4 meals in that period of time. You're going to have those protein spikes. You're going to have the biggest meal, let's say, around 3 o'clock, and that meal will have a ton of more protein, about, let's say, 60 grams of protein in that last meal, so kind of holds you until you go to bed at 9, so you can wake up at 5 because you need to get 8, 9 hours of sleep. And that's kind of what works for a lot of people. So the trade-off here, what's the trade-off? Well, there's no food after 3 to 4 p.m. And that can be tough because, as I said before, a lot of social gatherings, a lot of meals with family, with friends are happening in that 7 p.m., 8 p.m. window. And that can be really, really tough. And this is not to say that this approach can't work if you do it, let's say, 5 days like that, and then over the weekends you push it a little bit different, because on the weekends, let's say you're not training, it's a non-workout day, and you can do it like that. It's not to say that that won't work, but it is just a little bit of a trade-off, right? So you have to be aware of that trade-off happening there. So you won't be able to have food in the evening, and this can be this can cause problems with social stuff, right? So keep that in mind. Other than that, nothing wrong with just cutting the eating window a little bit earlier in the day and just not eating anything before bed. Nothing wrong with that, right? So as long as you hit your daily calorie amount, hit your daily protein, bam, you're good to go. Second scenario, you care a little bit less about muscle growth and you're okay with just delaying that post-workout meal. Let's say you finish your workout at 7 and you eat the post-workout meal around 11. That's also fine, right? So you open up the eating window around 11, maybe you close it off around 7-ish, 6, 7 p.m. That's totally fine as well. You have your dinner with your family at home or with your girlfriend, with whatever your friends, whatever you're doing, and that can also work. You might experience a little bit less muscle growth. I mean, that's just, we have a little bit of evidence. I mean, of course, that anabolic window is not like immediately after workout, and you have to run and trip over a protein shake and break a foot while you're running to get your shake to get the protein immediately after workout. It's not that hardcore, but if you're training fasted, if you're training in a fasted state or with a little bit of BCA, getting that meal faster in the system while the muscle protein synthesis is the most elevated is going to be right after workout, let's say in that period of, let's say 1 to 3 hours after workout, it's probably a good idea, right? But again, it doesn't make that much of a difference. I mean, people play this as the primary factor. If you're getting your daily calories and your protein amount and you're hitting your macros and from healthy food and all of that, and you have proper sleep and a great training program, you're gonna make fantastic gains. The body is very, very adjustable, and that's what people often forget. Even the studies that we have, they're not longitudinal studies. We don't know exactly what would happen if someone was doing this for, let's say, a couple of years, if their body would have just simply adjusted and being able to get the most out of that. And my theory and my hypothesis is that it's a lot less important than we think. I think the human body is a much more adjustable, and it will kind of figure its way out of the situation and maximize the results, right? So in that scenario, there's a little bit of a trade-off. You're not maximizing muscle protein synthesis, but again, how much does that really matter if your goal isn't to, let's say, step on stage, if your goal is just to be with that Hollywood physique, looking fantastic, clean, shredded, not a big deal, at least in my opinion, right? So it's totally fine if you completely fast until like 11 p.m. and just have that workout in the morning, or just have a piece of fruit and some BCA after workout, or like instead of BCA, I would even recommend more whey protein because you get more bang for your buck. So a scoop of whey protein and a piece of fruit after workout in the morning. You're not technically fasting, but I mean, it is not a big meal, right? So you're still gonna get a ton of benefits as well. So yeah, that's kind of my take on it. And generally, before workout BCA, is it necessary or not? Again, it's trade-offs, right? In my opinion, any calories, you're not fasting, and it's just like, okay, if you're not fasting, why are you doing fasting in general? And if you do have to get some protein, I would recommend whey instead of BCA, just because BCA itself, you just get the BCA with whey and plus other stuff, while BCA you're just getting the 3 quote-unquote essential amino acids. And I'll opt in for whey because I feel like you get much more, and that's just my opinion there. Aside from that, let's move on to the other question, and this kind of builds upon this, I think, and it's what's the best way to do intermittent fasting? And this is a tricky question, right? So, I mean, the best way is the one you can stick to and the one that just fits your goals. And again, we're coming back at the point of trade-offs. I think 16-8 approach is the best one if you're looking to really have that maximum output when you're talking about body composition. So building muscle mass, losing fat, and just maximizing your physique. I think 16-8 approach is just that perfect sweet spot where you're kind of fasting, you're getting some benefits from that, and then you're also having enough of those protein servings throughout the day, let's say about 3 servings, and that's kind of a really nice sweet spot where you're maximizing. And now, if you shorten the window to 4 hours, you might get 1 or 2 meals, so there's less chances of that muscle protein synthesis, and just using those just using meals, basically when you're eating, when you're fed, you're in a bulk state, so you have 2 chances instead of 3 or 4 if your window is bigger. I would say it's totally fine if you're not going to either extreme. If you don't care about body composition at all, if you're just doing this for health reasons, if you're just exercising because, I don't know, you don't care how you look necessarily, but you just care about health reasons, you can definitely fast and just do 1 meal a day, and that's it. That's totally fine, and there's people who are, making great gains with that, but it's not going to maximize results, right? That we can say with a fair deal of certainty that eating 1 meal a day is probably not a good idea. Similarly, anywhere between 3 and 6 meals is probably not going to make any difference. So it's kind of that, just stay in somewhere in the middle ground. And again, what's the best approach? The one you can stick to, and that's pretty much it, right? The one that allows you to get your calories and your macros the most consistent way, and whether you combine certain approaches. One great example here, let's say the way I'm organizing my diet, I'm gonna do 6 days of 16-8 approach. Then I'm gonna do 1 day of just eating, let's say 2 to 3 meals, but I'm gonna eat only 600 to 800 calories a day. So that's gonna be a protein sparing modified fast. So it's gonna be a longer fast, just gonna be protein, and it's gonna be just a day where I'm not gonna be training. I'm combining, that's on the 7th day. Other ways that have been proven, there's a fair deal of research on alternate day fasting. People had great success with that, right? So 1 day they eat whatever they want, as much they want, and people usually don't compensate. And then the next day they don't eat at all, right? So they just drink water or tea or coffee, right? So 0 calories. And then there's other approaches. The warrior diet, you can generally eat fruits and vegetables outside of the eating window as well, and then in those 4 hours you get your protein. That's also a viable approach. There's so many approaches out there. I would really urge you to try out and do some self-experimentation, because this is something you can experiment on yourself and without some great deal of consequence, right? So you can try it out. My personal recommendation is the 16-8 approach, just because I know with a decent amount of certainty that it works really well, and there's been some recent studies on it, and it is an awesome approach. And just judging from anecdotal evidence, looking at clients that my own clients and clients from other coaches who have been practicing this way of fasting, they've been getting fantastic results. So I would say that that's the one that I would recommend the most if you're looking to maximize your physique, right? So moving on, what's the best workout while doing intermittent fasting? So this is a common question. And it's interesting, right? Why is this even a question? Well, what does nutrient timing, intermittent fasting, or meal frequency have to do with the workout? Well, it does have a little bit to do with the workout. And see, from this context, let's say someone is doing IF. Generally, what they would be doing is a fat loss diet. So they would be in a caloric deficit. And for that reason, while you're in a caloric deficit, your recovery, the amount of volume you can tolerate, the amount of volume your body can tolerate and recover from, is going to be reduced. So it is generally a good idea to pay more attention to the amount of work you're doing in the gym while you're doing intermittent fasting, because most people will do intermittent fasting to lose weight and to be in a caloric deficit. If you're, let's say, gaining with a caloric, let's say, the IF approach, if you're lean bulking or if you're doing a maintenance phase, the workout it's a similar goal with the workout. It's always progressive overload. It's always getting stronger in the gym. It is finding the movements that are necessary for you to progress with, and the ones that fit your physique the most, that you have your own priorities, whether it's upper body, lower body, or certain lifts, or if you're doing powerlifting, it's going to be something to correct your weaknesses, and of course the big three, which is most of your workout volume. And it really depends on your goal. So there's no best workout for intermittent fasting, and intermittent fasting is just how many meals you eat in a day, so it doesn't really matter as much. But as I said in the beginning, I'm looking at it from a context of someone who's doing this for being in a deficit, for staying in a caloric deficit. So in a caloric deficit, it's a good idea to pay attention to your overall workload and your recovery, regardless of whether you're fasting or not. Okay, moving on. Another question, very, very common one. I'm 16 years old. Am I too young? Should I not do intermittent fasting? So what's the verdict on IF for teenagers? Well, the reason why I wouldn't necessarily recommend IF for teenagers, because you're in a phase of development and you're in a phase where you want to maximize your overall growth and not just physiological, but also psychologically, you might not be able to control your intake as well as someone who is, let's say, in their late 20s. And because there is a higher risk for developing eating disorders and being too neurotic and obsessive with your diet, I wouldn't recommend doing IF for someone who is, let's say, 16, 17, just because of those factors. Can you pull it off? I mean, if you're a super smart guy who is learning about this and you know how to manage your calories and macros, you're eating plenty of calories, you're getting strong in the gym, you're exercising, you're active, you're sleeping well, eating a healthy diet, can you pull it off? Absolutely. Would I recommend it? I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, because I know that naturally it's going to be a bit harder to stay in a surplus or in just getting enough food. It is already hard for most guys who are 16 to 18 years old or in their teens. So I wouldn't recommend that. So I would just say, just stick to a normal meal frequency, 4 to 5 meals a day, manage your nutrition, get your calories, get your protein, especially train, hit it hard in the gym, get strong, get enough sleep. I mean, that's a huge thing that I kind of failed when I was in my teenage years. I was just, I can go with 4 or 5 hours of sleep. Probably not a good idea, right? So focus on those big fundamentals and don't worry so much about IF. Moving on, question number 6, will eating, drinking X food break my fast? And I have a very clear rule with this. I don't want to put it in a gray zone. Basically, whatever has calories, you're breaking your fast, right? So you're not fasting. If you're getting any calories, regardless of insulin spiking or whatever the hell, you're breaking your fast, right? That's kind of my rule. You're either fasting or you're not fasting. I know a lot of people will say, well, the 50-calorie rule, you're not eating more than 50 calories. Yeah, sure. I mean, that's great, but I feel that there needs to be a straight cutoff. There needs to be a line, and you're either fasting or not fasting, and that's it. And what is allowed, quote unquote, in while you're fasting, I mean, tea, coffee, basically anything with 0 calories should be fine. And there's some really decent stuff on caffeine and circadian rhythm. So basically, consuming caffeine does help you ground your circadian rhythm a little bit. And that's something that I would look into. Let's say if you're jet lagged, if you're, let's say, in the night shift, morning shift, kind of shifting your work around all the time, coffee can be used while fasting to kind of ground that circadian rhythm, to tell your body, okay, now is the time to start the day. And it can be a really cool tool. There's been some research on that, which I'm actually looking into now for another video, which is going to be more on the circadian rhythm part of it. Moving on, I can't do IF on the weekends because my schedule changes. Should I do IF? Basically, can you do IF 5 days and then 2 days just eat normal 12-hour eating window? Why the hell not, right? And I don't even understand why this is a question. And I think a lot of people are kind of, again, coming in from an approach of whether it's going to make you lose weight automatically. So if I can't do it on the weekends, I might do this and that. No, I mean, if you count your calories and if you count your macros and if you make sure that they're relatively equal between the days that you are doing intermittent fasting and the days that you're not, or any way you spread your calories and your macros. Some people like to cycle their calories, some people like to do carb cycling, or whatever setup you have. There's nothing wrong with doing IF and practicing it even 2 days of the week, or just having one fasting day a week, just one day where you completely fast, which is a non-training day, and then for the other 6 days you just eat normal. I mean, there's so many ways to set this up, and I wouldn't necessarily look at what's the best way, because, I mean, as I said, science isn't clear on this, and we don't even know how many benefits actually come from fasting, how many are from just being in a caloric deficit. So I would recommend just doing whatever is most sustainable for you to hit your calories and macros with fitting that to match your goal. And the last question here, and it's a common one. I think a lot of people still wonder this. Will intermittent fasting cause me to lose muscle? And it's been around for a while. I mean, this is kind of a myth when I first became popular, whether it's going to result in muscle loss, and we know that this is not happening. We know that actually fasting is pretty damn well, works really well for holding on to muscle, and we have studies on alternate day fasting, and one really great study actually from 2016, from late 2016, that looked at the 16-8 approach to fasting, found that it's really good when it comes to retaining lean body mass. So basically, the group that had the quote-unquote normal diet and the group that had been doing IF had pretty much retained a lean body mass, while the IF group actually lost some fat mass. We could assume, because it was self-reported diet intake in that study, we could assume that people were eating a little bit less on the IF diet, which resulted in some a loss of body fat. But the important factor here related to this question is that the lean body mass remained the same. So even while people were generally losing fat, they were holding on to muscle, so which is really promising. This is a great study actually. People were eating sufficient amount of protein, they were doing training, and it is one of the probably the best studies by now that we have on IF and on generally on the 16-8 approach, which seems to be becoming more and more popular, and more and more people are using it. So that's kind of the Q&A. 8 questions that I wanted to cover for you guys, and some of the common stuff that I've been getting. As I said, if there's something that I haven't answered in this video, make sure to leave it in the comments below. That is going to ensure that it's going to be covered in the future videos, because I'm going to be going through the comments again and making sure to bundle all the questions again for the future video. Aside from that, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to that subscribe button below to support the channel, as well as check out that little bell button there right next to the subscribe button once you've subscribed, and click that, and then you can subscribe there to get the notifications for new videos that appear in this channel. This is something that YouTube has been messing around a little bit with, and if you're interested in just getting the latest notifications on just the content that's coming on this channel about the latest scientific research related to intermittent fasting, as well as any other topic related to fitness, nutrition, personal development, everything that's covered on this channel, make sure to check out that little bell button right there when you subscribe. Subscribe means a lot to me, means the world to me to have you guys there, have you guys notified, have you guys in the community. Aside from that, as I said, hope you're having a great time for the holidays, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.